My name is Sienna Gray. I'm 33 years old. 3 weeks ago, at my father's retirement gala, he stood on a stage in front of 300 guests and called me the family's greatest disappointment. When the laughter faded, I raised my champagne flute, smiled, and said, "Thank you for this final lesson in what I'm worth." Then I walked out. What nobody in that ballroom knew, not my father, not my stepmother, not my stepbrother, was that for the past 4 years, their company had been quietly dependent on mine. The daughter they dismissed as a failure had become their most essential business partner. And I was about to walk away for good. Let me take you back 17 years, to the day my future was decided for me by someone who was supposed to protect it. I grew up in Oak Hill, a wealthy suburb just outside Chicago. My father, William Gray, built a high-end marketing agency from nothing, Gray and Associates, with offices overlooking the Chicago River. To the outside world, we were the picture of success. A sprawling Georgian home, private schools, charity galas, and a family name that opened doors. What the outside world didn't see was that after my mother passed away when I was 9, I became an afterthought. My stepmother Elise arrived 2 years later, bringing her son Julian, 2 years older than me. Within months, the household shifted entirely. Julian became the golden child, praised for average grades, gifted a new car at 17, positioned as the heir to my father's company. I became the quiet one in the corner, expected to be grateful for what I was given and never ask for more. My father never raised his voice. He simply stopped looking at me unless he needed something. But my grandmother saw me. Eleanor Gray, my mother's mother, lived 3 hours away in a small house filled with books and classical music. Every Sunday she would call. She'd ask about my classes, my dreams, my sketches. I wanted to study design and marketing. She'd say, "You have the same fire your mother had, Sienna. Don't let anyone smother it." She died when I was 23. But before she left, she did something that changed everything. I'll come back to that. When I was 18, I received an acceptance letter from the Rhode Island School of Design. I had worked for years, top grades, a portfolio that earned me early admission, a partial scholarship. The remaining tuition was supposed to come from a college fund my mother had set up before she died. A fund she had specifically designated for my education in her will. My father was the trustee. The week before I was supposed to leave, he called me into his study. Elise stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder in that supportive pose I had learned to dread. "Sienna," my father said, not looking up from his papers, "we need to discuss some difficult family realities. The company is going through a challenging period. And your mother's fund, well, it's been depleted." I stared at him. "What do you mean, depleted?" "Investments went sour," he said flatly. "There's nothing left. Julian has been accepted into Northwestern's business program, and his education is critical for the future of the family business. You understand." I didn't understand. What I later discovered, through a cousin who let something slip years afterward, was that my mother's fund had held nearly $200,000. My father hadn't lost it. He had redirected it to cover Julian's tuition and a company expansion. My mother's final gift to me, stolen and handed to my stepbrother. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor and let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I dried my eyes, packed a single suitcase, and bought a bus ticket to Portland, Oregon. I had $1,200 saved from waitressing after school. It wasn't a college fund. It was a beginning. I didn't say goodbye. I left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm going to build something you can't take from me." My father never called to ask where I was. Portland was cold, rainy, and completely indifferent to my existence. I found a basement apartment in the Hawthorne district, 350 square feet, a hot plate instead of a stove, and radiators that clanged all night like someone hammering on pipes. I worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at a print shop, and nights I taught myself everything I could about marketing, branding, and business strategy through free online courses and library books. I didn't go to RSD. I built my own curriculum. A woman named Miriam Chen, who owned a small local boutique, gave me my first break. She needed a logo and some branding materials. I charged her almost nothing. She recommended me to a friend, who recommended me to a colleague. Within 2 years, I had a small but loyal client base. I named my operation Meridian Design. No website, no social media, just word of mouth and work that spoke for itself. I kept my name off everything. No public profile, no press releases, no photographs. All contracts went through a registered agent and my lawyer. I wasn't hiding out of shame. I was hiding because I knew my family. If they caught wind that I was succeeding, they'd find a way to either claim credit or tear it down. Silence had been my survival strategy in that household. Now it became my business strategy too. By the time I turned 27, Meridian Design had evolved into Meridian Branding Group, a full-service marketing and strategic consulting firm. I moved into a real office with 6 employees. We specialized in brand repositioning and market expansion, helping companies that were struggling to stay relevant in a rapidly changing landscape. It wasn't glamorous, but it was profitable, and I was very good at it. Then came the ironic twist that still makes me shake my head. Gray & Associates was in trouble. The marketing landscape had shifted dramatically. Digital disruption, new competitors, the decline of traditional advertising, and they hadn't kept up. A mutual business acquaintance recommended Meridian Branding Group as specialists in precisely the kind of turnaround they needed. They reached out through our standard inquiry process. No one at Gray & Associates knew who owned Meridian. All initial communications went through my operations director, a calm and capable man named Aaron. When Aaron brought me the inquiry, I sat with it for a long time. Part of me wanted to decline immediately, to protect my peace. But another part of me, the part that remembered my grandmother's words about not letting anyone smother my fire, wanted to see where this would lead. Not for revenge, for proof. Proof that the daughter they deemed worthless was capable of building something they desperately needed. I told Aaron to proceed. We signed a 2-year contract worth roughly 30% of Gray & Associates' annual operational budget. My father praised Meridian Branding Group at industry events. He called us the most innovative strategic partner we've ever had. He had no idea he was praising his own daughter. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something, maybe a whisper of my grandmother's voice, told me to go. Not for reconciliation. For closure. I had a feeling deep in my bones that my father would do something that would finally set me free. The gala was held at the Astor Club in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, 300 guests in black tie. I wore a charcoal silk gown, my mother's vintage pearl earrings, and a quiet confidence I had earned over 17 years of building a life from nothing. Elise spotted me first. Her eyes did a quick inventory. The dress, the earrings, the shoes, and her smile tightened. Yena, we weren't sure you'd have anything appropriate to wear. Smiled back. It's amazing what you can afford when you work for it. Julian swept past me in a designer tuxedo. Still freelancing in Portland? He asked with a smirk, not waiting for an answer. Let him walk. The evening was young. My father took the stage at 9 o'clock. He thanked colleagues, clients, his devoted wife Elise, his brilliant son Julian who would carry the company into the future. Then his eyes found me at a distant table near the service entrance, where I had been deliberately seated. And of course, he said, his voice dripping with practiced warmth, there's my daughter Sienna. No degree, no real career path. She's been finding herself in Portland for nearly 2 decades now. Perhaps one day she'll stumble into something worthwhile. He paused for effect. But let's be honest. Some people are just late bloomers who never bloom. 300 people laughed. Elisa's laugh rang out above the rest. Julian raised his glass in a mock toast. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply stood. The room went quiet as I rose from my chair. I picked up my champagne flute slowly, deliberately. Congratulations on your retirement, William. My voice was clear and steady, carrying across the silent ballroom. 40 years in business is quite an achievement. You've taught me so much about hard work, about sacrifice, and most importantly, about exactly what kind of loyalty family can expect from you. I raised the glass higher. Here's to the daughter you dismissed. And here's to what happens next. I set the glass down without drinking, picked up my clutch and walked toward the exit. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in that vast room. I didn't run. I didn't hurry. I walked, spine straight, head high. The way my grandmother once told me a woman walks when she knows her own worth. Behind me, dead silence. Then a ripple of whispers. Someone gasped. Someone else hissed. What just happened? I pushed through the double doors into the cool Chicago night. And for the first time in 17 years I could truly breathe. Elise caught up to me in the parking garage. Her composure cracked, her face flushed. Do you have any idea what you've just done? You humiliated your father in front of everyone. I turned to face her calmly. He humiliated me, Elise. I simply stopped accepting it. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You've become cold. No, I said. I've become free. I got into my car and drove away. The following Monday, I walked into Meridian's Portland office and called Aaron into my conference room. Draft the termination notice for Gray and Associates. 30 days per the contract. No explanation beyond strategic realignment. Then I sat down and wrote a personal letter to my father. I went through 7 drafts. The first was too angry. The second was too cold. The final version was simple and factual. William, the company you called the most innovative strategic partner you've ever had is mine. I built it from nothing after you took my mother's legacy and gave it to your stepson. For 4 years, the daughter you called a late bloomer has been the backbone of your business. I am terminating our contract. Not as revenge, as a boundary. My grandmother Eleanor left me a trust you never knew about, because she saw what you refused to see. Everything I have, I built with her faith and without your help. I don't need your apology. I just need you to know that I am not what you said I was. I never was. Don't contact me again. Sienna Eleanor Gray. I included a copy of my company's incorporation papers with my name highlighted as sole owner, and a photograph of my grandmother. The courier confirmed delivery at 9:14 a.m. on Tuesday. By 9:45 I had missed calls from my father, Julian, and Elise. By noon they had driven 5 hours from Chicago to Portland and were standing in my office lobby, demanding to see me. I let them wait 30 minutes. Then I invited them into conference room B. The one with glass walls so my entire team could watch. William looked older than I remembered. The bravado was gone, replaced by something brittle. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he began. You can't possibly own a company like this. I slid the documents across the table. Registration, tax filings, client list. I can. And I do. Julian slammed his palm on the table. Do you know what happens if you pull this contract? We lose 30% of our operational capacity overnight. People will be laid off. Then perhaps the incoming CEO should have diversified his client base instead of relying on a single partner, I said evenly. That's business 101. Elise tried a different angle, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. We're family, Sienna. How can you do this to your own family? You stopped being my family when you took my mother's money, I said. Silence. William's face went pale. Who told you about that? It doesn't matter who told me. It matters that it's true. I leaned forward. You told 300 people I was a failure. You made me the punchline of your retirement speech. But the truth is, your company has been surviving on my work for 4 years. Without me, you wouldn't have made it to retirement at all. He stared at me. For a single moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not remorse exactly, but recognition. The recognition that the daughter he had discarded had built something he could never have imagined. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing," I said. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know the truth before I closed this door forever." Julian stood. "This isn't over. We'll sue. You'll lose." I cut him off. "Every contract was signed legally. Every document is backed up. And my lawyer, who was also Grandma Eleanor's lawyer, has already reviewed every angle." Understood. "This meeting is over. Please don't contact me again." The fallout was swift. Gray and Associates announced a major restructuring 2 months later. They lost several key clients who chose to follow Meridian instead. Julian stepped down as CEO within 6 months. William's retirement fund, heavily tied to company stock, shrank considerably. I didn't celebrate any of this. I simply observed it from a distance, the way you watch a storm pass far out at sea. A few weeks after the confrontation, I received a handwritten letter from Elise. It wasn't an apology, she wasn't capable of that, but it was an acknowledgement. "William has realized what he lost," she wrote. "So have I." I didn't respond. My grandmother's trust had been the seed that allowed Meridian to grow. Eleanor Gray had seen the injustice coming long before I did. In her letter to me, which her lawyer delivered the day after the gala, she wrote, "I knew they would try to break you, my darling girl. So I made sure you would always have the means to build yourself back up. Use it well. Don't become like them. Let your success be your quietest, loudest statement." I keep that letter framed on my desk, next to a photograph of her and my mother. Today, Meridian Branding Group has 32 employees, offices in Portland and Seattle, and clients across the country. I speak at conferences about ethical leadership and building company cultures that value people over egos. I don't mention my father in those speeches. I don't need to. The work speaks for itself. If you've ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to lift you up, I see you. If you've ever had to walk away from a family that mistook your silence for weakness, I believe you. Your worth is not determined by their approval. Never was. It's determined by what you build, by who you become, and by the courage it takes to say enough. If this story resonated with you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment. Tell me about a moment when you chose yourself. I read every single one. This is Sienna. And I'm finally free.